Hi guys, my name is Jennifer and today I'm gonna be telling you a bunch of stories from when I lived in hostels in LA. This is a series that I'm gonna be starting where I tell a bunch of crazy stories that have happened to me when I lived in Los Angeles, and the first video is gonna be about crazy stories that happen in hostels. Of course, there are crazy things relating to crazy men, crazy landlords, weird characters, so stick around because there's plenty of juicy things to talk about. Okay, so where to begin? Well, first of all, I think I have stayed at about 4 hostels in my life, but at 2 of those I only stayed one night each, and the other 2 hostels I stayed for like about a month. It was like a month-long stay at each hostel, so those are the ones I'm gonna talk about. The first time I stayed at a hostel long-term was in North Hollywood, and this was probably 2008, so slightly more than 10 years ago, when I had just moved to LA. And this is when I was attending acting classes. The hostel was like very expensive for what it was, and I was stupid enough to select the co-ed option because it was slightly cheaper. And like I said, I didn't have money. So this hostel living situation had a section that was only for girls inside the house and only for guys also inside the house, but on the second floor, and then a co-ed living situation in an expanded garage. Basically, the landlord took his garage, which was pretty big for like 4 cars, and turned it into living quarters. So they were inside that garage, there were 4 bunk beds, so 8 beds total, and then a little fridge, a table, and a TV and some chairs, so you could sit and watch TV. After a couple weeks, I ended up moving to the girls only living quarters, and once I moved there, like, it was chill. But the first 2 weeks when I was living in the co-ed section, like, crazy things happened. So first story. So in this co-ed living space, I was in one of the bunk beds, and the top bunk bed was occupied by another girl, and then the other bunk beds were occupied by a variety of people. There was one Asian vegan girl, a white guy that I think was dating her, and then like 3 more guys. So there were a few more guys than girls, but everybody was chill. I mean, some of them were slightly sketchy, but non-threatening, basically. And when it was time to sleep, everybody just went to bed. I always used to put like a little bed sheet right in, because since I was on the top bunk bed, since I was on the bottom bunk bed, I would just put a sheet on the top bunk bed so I could cover my sleeping quarters. And yeah, that was it. So the first story is not as crazy, it's just like a little cringe. There were a few people here in these living quarters, and I would talk to some of them. And there was this French guy who was always barefoot. His feet were extremely dirty because he was always barefoot, and he was like, his hygiene was a little questionable. But he was sort of friendly, and he said hi, wanted to see why I was in LA. We were just talking normally there in the space, and I'm always try to be polite and talk to whoever talks to me. So I was talking to him normally. I swear to God, we did not talk about anything remotely romantic at all. I never gave a hint that I had any interest, nor did him. It was all about, why our short conversations, very basic conversations, were about why we moved to LA, what we were hoping to accomplish, blah, blah, blah. And I seriously only talked to this guy on a couple of occasions over the period of, 2 or 3 days. And at some point, like, I actually had plans to go back home for a while because I had some things to do. So I was gonna leave the hostel for a while. So I was one day on my laptop outside of the hostel in a sitting area, just like trying to book my bus ride or whatever. I don't know if I took a flight or a bus ride or what the hell I did. Probably a bus ride because I had very little money. And then out comes the French guy and hands me a letter, and I'm like, he's like, you can read it. You can read it now. And then he walks away, and I'm like, what? And I was already suspicious, like, wait, what letter is this? Like, I really don't know this guy well at all. He knows something about me. Like, what could this be about? So I open it with like anticipating cringe, and I start reading it, and it's basically this letter saying how, oh, he feels emotion and connection from our conversations, and he is a deep guy who's right now he's lonely. And basically he said, yeah, I like you, I'm thinking about you. And because he did have a French accent, so I was reading the letter with his French accent in my mind. And then at the end he's like, so what I'm trying to say is that you can either kiss me or ignore me and leave me. And I was like, bruh, like, what? Like, no. I don't know you, what the fuck, and you're dirty, no I don't. And I was 18 at this point, and this guy was probably like 28. Anyways, and I just finished reading the letter, and I'm like, ugh. And so I just folded and put it on the side, and I continue working on booking my bus ride. And then he comes super awkward and sits, and I'm like, hey, and he's like, so you read it? And I'm like, oh yeah. And he's like, and I'm like, oh, actually, I'm actually leaving the hostel probably tomorrow, so yeah, no. Also, I was like, I don't know you. And I just handed him the letter back, and he's like, oh, you are leaving? And I'm like, yes. And he's like, and then he just grabbed the letter and left. Like, I don't remember a lot about his reaction, only that he was like, okay, and like left. And I was just like, cool. Like, I mean, everybody's allowed to shoot their shot with whomever they want, obviously, but like, you have to do it when you like have a connection with someone, or there is a hint that they might be interested, or you've already given a hint that you're interested, not like out of the blue like that. And with such a cheesy line at the end that says, you can either kiss me or leave me. Like, anyways, there are other stories about men at hostels that I'll tell later, but right now I'm gonna tell the grossest story from hostels that I know, and it happened at this hostel. So remember I said there was an Asian vegan girl in the co-ed hostel living space? Well, apparently she and that white guy were dating. They met at the hostel and they started dating. And like I said, this was co-ed living situation with bunk beds. And I heard one of my friends there, I mean roommates who I talked to in that place, he was like, oh, you know what? Do you know that girl and that guy that look like they're dating? And I was like, oh yeah, what about them? And he's like, I think I might have heard them have sex the other day. And I was like, wait, what? And I was like, where? Here? Like here where we live, where we sleep? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, I mean, they had the sheets up around the bunk bed because she slept in the bottom bunk. So apparently they had just closed off the bed with sheets, and he says that he thought he might have heard them having sex. And I was like, whoa, that's wild, what the fuck? And so the following day, like four of us it was the evening, not late at all, like, I'm gonna say 8 p.m. We were sitting on our chairs watching TV. I think we were watching Jackass. I did not select it what we were watching. Somebody just like changed the channel and we were watching Jackass. And we were all sitting there watching the TV, and then I had not noticed that the vegan girl was there and that her boyfriend were there until I started hearing a squeaking noise.
A squeaking noise.
And I'm like, and I turned around, like they were about, my chair was about 10 feet away from their bunk bed, and I see the bunk bed and it's closed off with sheets and it's moving, and I see some shadows and I realize, oh my God,
They're having sex.
and I turn around and I look at everyone like, and everybody's like, hmm? And everybody, we were just like looking behind us, and this bunk bed is moving and they're trying to be quiet, but like it's so obvious. And I'm just like, actually, back in the day I had this like shitty portable camera, but I recorded them for like 10 seconds. I was the bed moving just because I thought it was hilarious, and we just had to sit there until it stopped, and someone decided just to like turn up the volume on the TV so we didn't have to hear it. And I'm just like, it was shocking. It was wild, but I guess some people have no decency and they don't care if there are strangers hearing you have sex. And there was a guy there who was also watching TV that later told me that he actually was on his bed was on the top bunk bed above the vegan girl. He said one night he was trying to sleep and then the bed started moving and he's like, what's happening? So he looks down and he sees the girl's hand holding on to the railing on the side of the top bunk bed while the bed is moving, and then he realizes that she's probably like riding this guy without any regard that he is on top of the top bunk bed, like without any regard that he might notice. And if you're wondering if I still have the clip of the bed moving, I still have it somewhere. I'm not gonna include it here, of course, but I have it. Now, let me tell you about the stories that happened at the second hostel, the second time I came back to LA, and I was still 18. So this hostel was in Reseda, and this hostel was in a house that was a good sized house, and it had like 5 rooms, and there were no co-ed rooms. It was just one room for the girls and like 3 rooms for the guys, because there's always more men at hostels because men feel safer at hostels than women. So there was only 1 room for the women, and the room for the women had 2 bunk beds. It was pretty small. So let me start the story by letting you know that this was my first time ever meeting and interacting with a trans person, because one of the girls in my girls' room was a trans woman. And so this was actually, I guess, a positive experience, because it was weird because obviously it was new to it, but it was positive because, you know, I got to meet a trans person in real life and see how she was completely chill. So that was one thing that was interesting but positive. And the other roommate there was a chubby white girl who just, you know, she minded her own business, but I think she has some sort of like slight developmental challenge. She was slightly slow. Anyways, let's go back to the rest of the house. The rest of the house, you know, the kitchen was always super crowded because everybody in the house shared it, and there was a lot more people in this hostel than in the other hostel. There were a lot of guys, like at least 10 guys. And well, there were some characters. Like there was one guy who had Tourette's syndrome, and he would always be saying the grossest thing. I never talked to him, but he was friends with the trans girl and the chubby girl who I did talk to. So sometimes I would be close to them, talking to them, and then he would just come talk to them, and I would have to hear all his crazy things that the Tourette's would make him say. I mean, I'm assuming it was Tourette's because there's no other, I don't know if there's another explanation for the things that he would say. Okay, warning, this is gonna be gross. He kept saying things about assholes in a compulsive way. He would just be like, in your ass, in your asshole, in your asshole, you asshole, like variations of that. And creepy. I was just like, I feel bad if it's really Tourette's and he cannot control it, but if he wasn't and he just had some sort of fixation, that's really weird. And he wasn't talking to anybody in particular. He wasn't like looking at anybody in the eye and telling them these things. He would just be like writing something and saying that, cooking and saying that, just some compulsion. What else? Okay, there was also another vegan guy in this hostel, but this guy was old. He's probably like mid to late 60s, and he was always wearing like military type clothes, but they were not military clothes, just like, you know, the military print, that green print. He would always wear that, and he had a very specific routine that in the morning when people were getting breakfast, he would come to the kitchen, take out a brand new bottle of soy milk and 2 brand new boxes of tofu. Tofu boxes are like about this size, and he would drink the whole bottle of soy milk, and then he would, with a spoon, eat the whole 2 boxes of tofu without any seasoning, without cooking them, anything, just like eat them. And then he would like stay there sitting for a bit, like 10 minutes, watching whatever TV everybody was watching, and then he would go outside with a bicycle, and right away he would just leave for the day. And he looked really fit. Like, I don't know if like he survived entirely on tofu or if that was like most of his diet, but he looked healthy. You know how they say that like tofu and soy has too much, can generate estrogen or something in men, and that's bad. I don't think it was bad for this man because he was healthy and he was old. Anyways, it was still weird. Like, at that time I was a vegetarian, and I still couldn't fathom like drinking that much soy and that much tofu in one sitting. Like, no. All right, so before we get to the stories of men, I'm gonna tell you something crazy that happened with the landlord of this hostel. The landlady, it was a woman. She was really nice when she first met me, and she was excited when I told her like, oh, I just got a job at this coffee shop, and she was like, wow, look at her. She barely moved here and she got a job. She's an example. Like, she was nice to me. And then one day, well, disclaimer, I have always been a messy person. I clean things, but I don't really organize things. That's my problem, and it's been like that since I was a child. Like, when I was little, the thing that would get me in trouble the most with my parents was that I would not clean up to their standards. I mean, that I wouldn't organize up to their standards. And most of the time, I wouldn't even organize at all because I did not see any issue. I often thrive in a chaotic mess, chaotic creative mess. Anyways, I'm much better now, but I'm still like not the most neat person in the world. Anyways, this landlady one day comes into the girls' room and she sees my bed and she's like, oh honey, can you please clean up your room, because I think in your bed, I was in the bottom bunk, and she's like, because I think there might be another girl coming to see this space in a few days, and I want it to look clean so that she really wants to rent the room or the bed. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, cool. And I clean, but by clean I meant clean to my standards, organizing to my standards. I packed some of my clothes, I put things away, but I didn't like remove everything out of sight, because I'm like, that's literally the only space I have to put things there, or my suitcase. And I guess she was expecting me to put everything in my suitcase, and I did not do that. I had left a couple of things on the bed itself. So 2 days later, I come back from work, normal day, because yeah, I was still working. I had just begun working at the coffee shop, and I was still living at the hostel, but I was planning on moving out. So I come back to the hostel, ready to chill, ready to sleep on my stupid bunk bed, and the bunk bed is naked. Like, there's no bed sheets, none of my stuff is there, and I'm like, what the fuck? like, where's my stuff? And at first I thought, like, did somebody take them? Did somebody steal them? I look around, like, no, where is it? And then I'm like, oh wait, I'm like, the landlady, what? And then so I go look for her, and I finally find her, and I'm like, hey, where's my stuff? And I was angry, but I was trying to hide it. And she's like, yes, I put it all in a trash bag and threw it away because I told you to clean and you didn't, and it was a disgusting mess, and somebody is gonna come and is gonna see the room that is messy and they're not gonna want to rent it. And I'm like, where is it? And she's like, it's in the trash bag in the shed in the backyard. And she's like, you can go get it. And I was like, I will. And she's like, but this is the last time you can do that. And next time I will not put it in the shed, I will just put it in the curb and you can leave. Like, she literally threatened to kick me out of the hostel because I wasn't organized enough. And like, if you were to go back in time and see the mess, like, it's not a mess, but I guess for her, she wanted it to look like nobody lived there so that other people would be like, I want to live here. She wanted to trick them or something. Anyways, that's what she did. And then later, like a few days later, when she had cooled off, she had a baby too. She's like, oh, I have some errands to run. Could you watch her just for like an hour while I come back? And I was like, okay. Because I thought her baby was cute. Her baby was less than 1 year old. So she literally left her baby with me, a stranger, in a hostel. I had been there for less than 3 weeks by now, and there were other random strangers at the hostel. Like, I know that I come off as a trustworthy person, and I am, but how does she know that? Why would she leave me her baby? What if I was secretly a child kidnapper and I was just waiting for that opportunity, and then she leaves and, you know, I stole her baby? Like, I thought that was pretty bad judgment on her part, but obviously I'm not a bad person. I just watched her baby. I did not kidnap her baby. But if I was her, I would never leave my baby, my imaginary baby, to any random person that lives in the hostel that I run, you know? Okay, and now the two weird stories about men at this particular hostel. So there was a guy there that had a motorcycle, and he thought he was very cute. I mean, he wasn't ugly, and maybe he was almost cute, but I wasn't interested. Anyways, but he would talk to me when we were in the common areas. And he was probably, I'm gonna say like mid to late 20s, and was talking to me, and I could tell that he was flirting. He thought I was cute or whatnot. And he was like, hey, would you be interested in, like, have you ever been on a motorcycle? Would you like to ride it? And I was like, I don't know, maybe, like, no, I don't think so, because this is scary. I was just saying no without saying no. It's just that charming way we women have of saying no without saying no. Anyways, and also, like, I was 18. I wasn't experienced with men, experienced with dating, experienced with flirting at all. So I basically just said, nah, not today, thanks. But I guess he didn't want to take no for an answer, because the next day when I got to the hostel, he saw me, and I knew he was gonna ask me again, so I just made a beeline for the girls' room and I went in. And that didn't stop him. He came and he knocked on the door, and I was like, I opened it, I was like, yes. He's like, hey, so you wanna go on the motorcycle? And I was like, no, I don't think so, but thanks. And I closed the door, and I thought I was gonna, like, just go back to keep doing my own thing. And he just opened the door and came in, and he's like, are you sure? And I was like, hey, you can come in. And he's like, come on, it'll be fun. And I was like, no, please go outside. And he did. And I closed the door, and this time I actually locked it, and he started like trying to like mess with the lock to open the door. And he's like, hey, we just want to talk. I don't remember exactly what happened. I just remember being very uncomfortable and a little scared. and just like standing there, and eventually he stopped, like he gave up. And apparently some of the other guys in the house saw what he was doing, that he was basically borderline or harassing me, and they reported him to the landlady, and I don't know if she kicked him out, but she definitely was like, can't do this anymore, like leave her alone, do not talk to her. Yeah, I mean, it's been more than 10 years, so I don't remember the details. I don't know if she kicked him out, but yeah, after that I never had to deal with him or see him again, so that was good. And unfortunately, that's not the only time somebody has tried to break into my room. It happened again, like probably like 2014, with like friends that were too drunk, guy friends trying to, like, in a house party, trying to come into my room when I was clearly like, no, you can't come in. Like, it's very creepy behavior. They did not come in at the end, and I had to like have my whole body against the freaking door. But yeah, it's scary out there for girls. I know it can be scary for guys too sometimes, but anyways. All right, and then the final story is the most cringy of all of the stories. This is a story also took place at this place. So there was this slightly older guy, probably, he looked like early to mid 40s. And it was this white redhead guy with a red hair beard. And we were all, a group of us, just watching TV in the living room. And he starts chatting me up, like, what you do, why are you in LA, blah, blah, blah. And I'm talking to him normal. And eventually it gets to the point where people were talking about drinks, blah, blah, blah. Somebody was like, you want a beer? And I was like, oh, no, thank you. Also, I was 18. Even though I had beer by this point in my life, drinking wasn't like a thing in my life. So yeah, somebody offered me a beer and I said no thank you, and then the guy took this as an opportunity to say, oh, you don't like beer, what kind of drinks you like? And to sound like I knew anything about drinking, I think I said pineapple and vodka, which was one of the few drinks that I had ever had in Mexico, because in Mexico you can drink when you're 18. And I was like, yeah, pineapple vodka, I like that. And he's like, oh, cool. And then, kept on the conversation, casual conversation, nothing special. And then the next day, I come home and he knows I'm 18. Like he knows I'm not 21 yet. I come home and he's like, oh, hey. He's like, guess what? I got some pineapple juice and some vodka in case you want some. And I was like, and he's like, yeah, I stopped by the store and got some pineapple juice and vodka. Wanted me to make you a drink? And I'm like, no, thank you. And he's like, he looked disappointed, but I was like, this is so freaking sketch. And this guy was actually always on the computer. There was one computer in the TV room for free for anybody to use. And he was always in the chat. And he said that he was talking to his ex-wife's daughter, like his stepdaughter or something. But I was always like suspicious, like what is he doing in this chat? Like, who is he really talking to? And I just think it's so creepy that like the very next day he brings me my favorite drink. Like, why are you offering alcohol to an 18-year-old when you're a 40-something-year-old man? Like, that's creepy. Anyways, those were all of my hostel stories. I think there are a couple more. I just can't remember the details right now. But yeah, the moral of the story is do not stay in hostels unless you absolutely have to, and try to make it a short stay. Do not stay for a month like I did. Do not stay in co-ed spaces, and just make sure to be very safe and don't talk to random people that are way too old to be talking to you, especially if you're young. And yeah, the next story that I'm gonna share for this series is gonna be the story of all of my previous roommates that I've had, because I've had probably more than 20 roommates in the time period that I lived in LA. I've had many roommates, many crazy stories, so I will share that with you next time. And And well, yeah, that's it for this video. If you liked it, please give it a like, and thank you for watching.